We can do that. We opened the public meeting at 2:30, and we recessed right away to an executive session to discuss an insurance issue and a real estate issue. I'll now close that executive session, and we'll reconvene the public meeting. First item is roll call. If you could please call the roll, Diane.
Commissioner Briscoe? Commissioner Briscoe? Present? Commissioner Robbins is present?
Here.
And Commissioner McCauley?
Hello, everybody.
For the record, all three commissioners are present.
Our next item is the advisory committee notices. We have this Thursday two of our advisory committees, the BIAC, Bellingham International Airport Advisory Committee meets Thursday the 9th at 5 p.m. at the ARF building. It's open to the public. We also, that morning at 9:30, have the Technical Airport Advisory Committee, or the TAC. That meets at 9:30 at the same building. And on Tuesday, March 14th, in this room, we have our Marine Advisory Committee, or the MAC, that meets. So those are all open to the public as well. Before we get into the public comment period, I'd like to call Brian McCachran to the phone, or to the microphone, please.
If you'll allow me, Commissioners, I'd like to introduce Brian. My name is Adam Fulton, Director of Facilities. At the encouragement of our director, we are always on the lookout for cost savings throughout the port. You might recall last meeting we looked at a savings in our mail delivery courier service, and in fact that's going to work, and it's going to save a good bit of money every month. Not every idea works, but this one does, and they come from all over in the staff. And it's just my great privilege to introduce Brian McCracken, our electrical foreman, to tell you about one such savings.
Welcome, Brian.
Thank you. I'm Brian McCracken, electrical foreman.
Hey, Brian, how long you worked at the port?
26 years, and this is my first commission
I was
meeting.
going to say, it's your first time ever.
And I've got guys longer than me that still haven't been here.
No pressure, no pressure.
So anyways, I've been doing a lot of the PM program for several years under the direction of Carol Williams. And one of my duties is to do fire alarm certification tests annually. Since I've changed my role a little bit, became foreman after our previous foreman retired, it's given me an opportunity to dig in a little bit more for other cost-saving measures. And to be honest with you, I'm always on the lookout for doing it, whether if it's a lighting project, something like what I'm going to talk to you about here, or anything like that. Long story short, I went in and I've been dealing with, we deal with Guardian Security. They do all the monitoring of our fire alarm systems. And they've been kind of bending my ear off and on for the last few years. And they have basically what we refer to as an RF frequency system that we can attach it to our fire panels that will send the alarm signal to Seattle. Thus, they dispatch out the fire department, or if it's a trouble, they dispatch us. Presently, what we have is, I want to say it's 30, I think the total number is 33 fire systems. We pay approximately $35 a month to have Guardian monitor it, but then we also have to bring in 2 phone lines at a cost of $30 each a month on top of that. We did some figures. I sat down with Guardian a little bit. We were really nervous for a long time about the reliability of the signaling. They've assured me that due to technology, we made a lot of gains. It's been around for quite a few years, but they made a lot of gains. The signal frequency is very, very reliable. We could turn around and eliminate the 2 phone lines at a savings of $60 a month. In exchange for that, though, the cost to the port will go from $35 up to, I believe it was $60 a month per account. It works out to roughly $40 a month per account times 33. And in the end, it saves us about $16,000. So I came back in and I presented it to Carol, and then she took it on forward up to Adam, and it's gone up through the chain of command. we're moving forward with it because we see it's a significant savings. It's going to pay for itself very quickly for the cost. The cost to install it is we have to pay a permit fee to the city of Bellingham at $235. We'll recoup that cost in less than a year. The equipment itself, that's part of the increased cost of the radio frequency. So that's why we pay the $65 a month to have it monitored. The other part that's a cost savings to the port, I'm called out 2-3 dozen times a year for failed phone lines. 95% of the time it's a CenturyLink issue or whatever phone provider we have at that point. This eliminates those calls for us at this point because Guardian, under the contract that we have with them, they will maintain and service all the communication side of the fire alarm system. So there's a multi-pronged way to save money. So Adam had got a hold of me and then Rob sent it through that they asked me to come in and present it to you guys and let you guys know what we're doing. In maintenance, we're always looking for ways to save money, and we do it quite often, just very quietly. So.
That's great. Always nice to save money, and I really appreciate the corporate culture we have in our port to save money on things like this. This is the second one, I think, in a month, and that's wonderful. I think, and thank you for coming. Don't take so long next time.
It might be, I don't know. But thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Good work.
Thanks, Brian.
You know, I was peeking our budget this year, and I was looking at a lot of our phone charges. Apparently, this is a lot of the phone charges, so I'm excited about this. Thanks, Brian.
Well, working with IT, because they handle all the phone charges and whatnot, we're going to cut out a little over 60 lines. So at $30 per, that does add up to a savings, and that's an annual savings. So,
That's wonderful.
okay, thank you.
Super. So now we move on to our public comment period. Do we have anyone signed up?
We do not currently have anyone signed up, though I was presented a letter from Ms. Stephanie Twyford for your attention, and she was in the audience earlier, but she's asked that I give this to you. It's on the subject of benches and memorial plaques.
Okay. Is there anyone that wanted to sign up that didn't get a chance to? Very good. We'll move on to our next item. Diane, if you could read it, the consent agenda.
A motion to approve consent agenda items A through D.
Okay, gentlemen, any discussion on items A through D?
I have a question on item D, and Brian will probably have the answer for this one. On the interagency agreement, on page 3, I think it is, item 2, the June 30th, 2017 date that's in there on the period of performance,
Correct.
is that a plan, any date, a starting date? What is that date? Because I
That-
see it and then it's kind of contradicted later on in the,
No, that's a great question, Commissioner, and that was one that we've worked with the city of Bellingham on. The schedule of this project probably goes beyond the duration of that, but that's actually where the biennium stops for the state budget. So that's what they have the authority at this point to authorize these dollars towards. We're going to continue to work with Department of Ecology to see if we can extend that. Either way, I think that we, working with the City Parks Department, will be able to utilize this money in the upfront design engineering work prior to that June 2017 date. But it is a hard line currently with the Department of Ecology because their authority under when the state budget ends. So these were dollars that were allocated for this biennium only. Does that answer the question?
it's kind of, we were supposed to use that money prior to that date? Is that-
Correct.
And do we have the ability to do that or not?
Yes.
Okay.
That's
Thank
the
you.
plan.
Thank you, Brian.
Brian, stay there.
Okay.
The item D, the agreement with the Department of Ecology on the beach,
Correct?
people be able to pull their kayaks up on that beach?
I believe so, yeah. That's the
right.
plan. I mean, it would be a public access point which would have multi-use, including public kayak
Then I get to say
access.
what I'm about to say. Where's George Dyson? He's not here today. It's too bad. George Dyson came to me years ago and said, we need to do something about hand launch kayaks down in the Whatcom Waterway. So, one, I don't like the port building parks, and Adam explained to me that this is cheaper than the alternative, which was maintain a bulkhead there. So we save money, and we get to build a park, and we get to solve some pent-up demand for watercraft use down at Whatcom Waterway. So this is a huge win, I think, for not just the Port of Bellingham, but for the citizens of this county. So I appreciate it, and thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Commissioner.
Super. Any other questions on the consent agenda? Hearing none. All those in favor?
All right.
Aye. Thank you, Brian. Our next item is action item 1. Diane, if you could please read it.
A motion to approve small city economic development funds for projects in the cities of Blaine, Everson, Ferndale, and Linden.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Dodge Snodgrass, Economic Development Specialist for the Port. I'm here with you with some recommendations for funding for our Small City Economic Development Program. This is a popular program that the Port has been providing since 2004. We were the first port in the state to start such a program. And the idea is we've had the Small City Partnership, which I staff, has been meeting over about the same period, and idea grew that the commission then supported is finding ways we create a matching fund program to support and leverage projects that the small cities, the 6 small cities, would be interested in taking on. So we create an interlocal agreement with all the cities and have been supporting programs it's recommended by the partnership that we brought before the commission. The typical award we've been making is $15,000 to $20,000, and the average spent per project is a little under $14,000. Some of them have been under budget, some have started, not been completed, but overall they've been completed. This year we put out $65,000 to the cities, made available through the economic development budget. And as I mentioned, our port was the first port to start the program. Several others now have a matching fund program with the cities in their jurisdictions, some of the countywide port districts. So here's some numbers in terms of what we've invested in the cities since 2004. A little over $650,000, and we've required matching funds by the cities, which you can see well exceeds what the port has invested. And tied to that, and I have a summary report that I put on our website and we'll distribute it to you. We show capital funds that the cities have acquired to complete public works construction projects, roads, for example. And you see right now they're up to about $45 million. So I can say the port is a leverage source, and for a lot of the communities, they'll say when they go to a funding agency, say like the Transportation Improvement Board, they can cite the port as a partnering agency, which is a good selling point in terms of getting support from agency funding sources to complete projects. In addition, our ultimate goal then is private investment and job creation in the communities where these projects are completed. So I'll point a few projects we've supported in the past. City of Blaine, the Gateway Business Park, we were involved back 2006 when it was a municipal airport. The city wanted to evaluate converting the airport into a business park, and so we partnered with the city to do that study, and ultimately they created the business park. They put in the Boblet Road improvement. We supported that, and subsequently there's Mercer Distribution and Transportation, which is a company that's located in the business park. The city is currently negotiating with a food manufacturer in Whatcom County about building in their business park. They've engaged a marketing broker to promote the property. We've supported evaluations for a stormwater treatment facility and gateway and wetlands mitigation. So that's got great potential in terms of economic development, business creation in Blaine. In Sumas, the industrial area there, which is about 150 acres overall, the port's a small part of that. We've partnered with the city on the Bob Mitchell Road with some of the improvements there. They upgraded their substation with PSE. We supported some feasibility work in that regard. And recently they evaluated their circuit system because the city is a municipal utility. And that's benefited a number of the industrial employers in Sumas, including IKO, including Cedar Prime, Saco, and of course Teal Jones, that's our tenant up there, and as you know, they're leasing the additional parcels and they'll be expanding. So Sumas has been a great partner. City of Ferndale, the Second Avenue extension, that's some work off the Portalway exit. And we supported some of the design engineering work, and they secured some funding. And there's commercial mixed-use development going in. And in addition, the city's working on a connector with Thornton Road, so that's going to benefit Sampson Rope and open up some additional light industrial property. So that's a project that's going to be moving forward. And they secured about $19 million from the legislature to get that project going. And Everson, we partnered in Mission Road in their industrial area south of the city, and that's benefited Tiger Construction, Granite Concrete, some of the property owners down there, and Selco, the lumber mill. So we especially like to help the smaller cities in that regard. So the requests before you this year, and these there's an application that we put out in January, and the last small cities meeting in February, it went before the mayors that were present, and they made their recommendations. And the first before you is City of Blaine again, and they're looking at an alleyway access on the other side of Peace Portal Drive on the bank side. And there's several properties there, some businesses there that are not occupied, and they think if they can create better access on the alley access, it will be beneficial for business development. So this is for some professional service work. And actually, the planning director for Blaine said he's talking to one of the building owners, and they're very excited about the possibility of doing this alley analysis. So it'll be beneficial to the development of downtown Blaine. So we're looking at $15,000 from the port and $15,000 from the city. In Everson, they've secured funding for Lincoln Street improvement, phase 1 and phase 2. And this is a commercial road that serves Nilatech and Criterion Athletics on the west side of town, and it will be connecting with some commercial property to be developed. And they need some support with construction engineering. There were some delays in the project right away that needed to be included in the project, and so we're providing a little gap financing match with the city to get this project going, and it's going to be bid fairly soon. Linden, you see on the drawing there, they have a landfill that they don't city landfill they don't use anymore, and they like to do some remediation, repurposing, and analysis for funding to create about 8 acres of light industrial property, and that's right off Birch Bay Linden Road. It's sort of next to Oxbow. And so they feel this would be beneficial to add to their inventory of light industrial property. So 15 from the port, 15 from the city. And now Ferndale, this is a little different project. A little backstory here. A couple years ago, there was the tourism sponsored an analysis of wayside finding and navigation around Whatcom County with a consultant named Roger Brooks. And the cities have been kind of running with that to look at ways they can improve their local signage work. And there have been some delays with tourism to do an overall wayfinding analysis, but that's going to start moving forward. The city of Ferndale proposed to develop a wayfinding program to promote their Pioneer Village and the area towards downtown. And their city council approved some matching funds for moving that forward. So that came before the Small Cities Group last meeting. We also had a representative from Bellingham Whatcom Tourism to give an update on the overall strategy work. So Ferndale wants to move forward with this project. We're hoping we're going to dovetail in the overall analysis so it will be completed by tourism. And they're looking for partnering funding for sign fabrication. And that'd be completed towards the end of the year. So those are the packages of projects we're bringing for you for your approval.
Thank you, Dodd. Any questions?
Yeah, Dodd, a couple. I was looking through a document, and I think I may have missed you just this detail in regards to Linden. They're going to build on the landfill? Is that what I heard?
No, they need to do an analysis, the landfill. They need to do a remediation analysis to see what sort of repurposing they can do with the vacated landfill, excuse me. And so they can convert it to light industrial property.
A landfill. As far as I know, it's never been done. You don't build on landfills. It's municipal waste, right?
Sorry?
Is municipal solid waste?
I believe so.
Well, we could solve that for them right now. It's a golf course. So, I don't know how you build on a landfill. Anyway, moving on. Ferndale, and,
Yeah, sure.
Ferndale in regards to wayfinding, I don't know how close you are to the conversation they're having, but how does has anybody brought up wayfinding in the age of smartphones and navigation systems and how those things relate? Because it used to be you had to create an amazing series of signs to help people sort of get around towns, especially if they don't know where they are. Has that come up at all in this conversation with Ferndale?
Yeah, that's an aspect of it, I think, and actually that came up at the Small Cities Group when they talked about the wayfinding project as having an app or ways that digital media would be a way to navigate around, be a component of that. I can't speak authoritatively about the scope for the tourism study. They're starting to move that forward. They have a new CEO at tourism, so there's a bit of a gap in that, but that's going to be a priority project for them to undertake.
Okay, cool.
There was quite a discussion of that at the Small City Caucus this month, and on do they need signage? Why not just use your smartphone?
Use an app.
So on. But, I have coffee with a group of guys, and they're all from these cities, and they're always asking me, what's the port do for me? For my $4.50 increase in taxes this year, so this is great. They now know. They will know. Thank you very much for your presentation. No other questions?
No, I'd like to make a comment, though. So you mentioned gap funding and that sort of thing in your presentation. You always do. Last Saturday at Meridian High School, I ran into Mark Tolsma from Twin Brook Creamery. And we helped them, not through this program, but we helped Twin Brook with a $100,000 loan. I believe it was $100,000. And I did not know this at the time. Mark told me that they were closing if they didn't get that financing. So they took that $100,000, which they're paying back, leveraged it to get more private financing, and have expanded, and they're I would say pretty successful at this point. So I know it doesn't seem like much to a lot of people, but these can be really, really huge for these projects to go forward. So I'm excited about all these little things that we do like this.
Yeah, that's our revolving loan fund that John Michener manages, and it's good. The little bit of dollars can make a big difference.
Yeah, I did not know that about Twin Brook, that they were that close to literally closing the doors.
We took over that revolving loan fund at the same time we took over the ADO. I think it's being managed very well. For a long time, it didn't have any capital in it because the money was all loaned out. But a bunch of the lendees have returned the money, and so now we're blessed with having a full fund again. And we're gonna, I think it's this week or next, we're gonna have a meeting about a business that has applied for those funds. So
Fantastic.
Super. Thank you very much. So hearing no other comments, all those in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Aye. Let the record show that passes 3-0. Our second action item, if you will, please, Dan.
Authorize the executive director to enter into a national estuary program, Department of Health, Puget Sound Restoration Federal Grant Agreement with the Department of Ecology for a commercial pump-out system at the Squalicum Harbor Sawtooth.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Pam Taft, Special Projects in the Marinas. I'm here today asking you for approval of a grant contract with Department of Ecology to fund a new sewer pump-out system for the Squalicum Sawtooth dock. So to give you a little bit of background, in 2014, Department of Ecology with Department of Health petitioned the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency asking them to establish Puget Sound as a no-discharge zone. And EPA defines a no-discharge zone as an area where any type of sewage is prohibited from being discharged. One of the criteria that the EPA uses in order to determine a no-discharge zone is the availability of sewer pump-out facilities for vessels. And so to support EPA's designation of a no-discharge zone, Ecology offered grant funding to put in new pump-outs and to also assist these larger vessels that will now have to go and install holding tanks. So there are more than 90 discharge zones in 26 of the states. Washington has none. And under the Clean Water Act, Section 312, states can only regulate the discharge of sewage in a no-discharge zone. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency provides federal funds to Department of Ecology to support efforts in Puget Sound. So EPA selected Ecology to receive 2 grants, one for toxics and nutrients, and the other for the Watershed Protection and Restoration Grant. The National Estuary Program, which is the funding title of our grant, falls under the Toxics and Nutrient Grant. And this grant is used to improve the environmental health by preventing toxics from getting in Puget Sound. So there are currently 14 commercial pump-out facilities throughout Puget Sound, and commercial vessels, it's defined as tugs, Navy ships, charter vessels, and commercial fishing vessels. And the ports of Seattle and Bellingham were awarded funding to install additional sewage pump-out systems for the commercial vessels. Our system will be installed on the Squalicum Sawtooth Dock, and it will primarily serve the commercial fishing vessels. Each gate at Squalicum Harbor has at least, with the exception of Gate 7, which is the Gillnet dock, they each have at least one sewage pump-out system, and those service primarily the recreational boats. And those pump-outs were funded through grants by Washington State Parks and Recreation. However, the capacity of those pump-outs is not sufficient for these larger vessels. So this grant will allow us to put in a pump-out system that can pump these bigger boats out. So staff is recommending that you approve this agreement, and construction is scheduled for July of 2017. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Where do they discharge now?
They can discharge 3 miles offshore, or if it's treated sewage, they can discharge inside Puget Sound. And
will
a lot
they
of the,
still be able to do that once these are in place?
they will not be able to discharge within the no discharge zone, so they will either have to put holding tanks on and discharge at a sewage pump out facility, or they'd go 3 miles offshore, outside of a no discharge zone.
Thank you. Any questions, gentlemen?
No, I have none.
So, you know, this is a bit of a fascinating thing where people often say, what are you doing for me with my tax money? In this case, if anybody's been watching the news, they'll see that there's been a push in Congress to actually get rid of the EPA completely. This grant's coming from the EPA. The Salish Sea, although I think we oftentimes take it for granted, it is a body of water of national significance. And to be able to leverage or even to ask the federal government to help on something like this is a huge, huge thing, because this is a significant amount of money. And I appreciate, and I think a lot of people that live and work in the Salish Sea can appreciate that small things like this add up to big changes in the health of the waterway. And big things happen out in DC that affect us really, really locally here. And I'm glad that we've managed to squeak this in before some other changes happen. But if anybody needs reminded how important these dollars are to us right here, this is a perfect example. So I'm glad we got the grant and we're able to move forward with it. So.
Bobby, will the fishermen use this, Commissioner?
Yeah, I think the fishermen are using some. Now they got a portable one. We've had a portable system for a long time on our float, so it's not like we haven't had a system here in the harbor. But this allows your larger vessels, which more clear out on the end of the thing, not to have to push that cart all the way back and forth. And it will be used. You know, most of the boats now have some system in that you can treat this stuff on board the vessel and then discharge it.
Well, that's been part of the problem it comes up constantly at the Puget Sound Partnership. And I'm the Washington Port, Public Port Association rep there on that organization. And the pushback is that there aren't enough pump outs. And this is one more easy way so that the state can say, okay, look, we've got lots of pump outs, there's plenty of opportunity. Now we can make the no discharge zone, because that's been a huge amount of pushback, so.
And the nice thing about this pump out is on the Sawtooth dock, it's going to be stationed, a car's going to be stationed in the oil dump, and there's going to be connection points at each of those Sawtooth berths, and one on the flat side of the Sawtooth. And so it's going to be a direct discharge into the sewage, so it's going to be really nice.
Yeah, make it easy, that's the deal.
Next thing we need to work on is having our neighbors to the north stop all their dumping in the straits, and that would really help.
That's happening. Victoria's moving forward on this. It is, yeah, seriously. Ask Morris. Jeff Morris will tell you all about it.
I'll believe it when I see
Yeah,
it.
apparently it's happening, so we're good. Yeah, anyway.
Okay, any other comments?
No, thanks.
Hearing none, all those, thank you, Pam. Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Let the record show that passes 3-0.
Thank you.
And our third action item, Diane, if you could read it.
A motion to approve Resolution Number 1361, declaring the acid ball artifact surplus to the needs of the port and authorizing the executive director to transfer this artifact to the city of Bellingham.
Thank you, Diane. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Brian Gowan, Director of Environmental Programs. This is an item that I think the Commission is probably fairly familiar with. We've updated you, Sylvia Goodwin and I have discussed this a few times in our recent waterfront district updates, but we thought we'd take just a few moments because it does represent an incremental milestone where we're continuing to move forward on public access, redevelopment in the waterfront district, as well as continuing to honor the history of the site. So just a little bit of background and context before the Commission decision on this. The acid ball, also known as the acid accumulator, was constructed at the GP site, or the Puget Sound Pulp and Timber Mill at the time in 1937 and 1938, and actually shown here under construction next to the digester building from historical photos that we have from the construction of the GP Mill property. It was along with a number of other, or another acid accumulator ball was used at the pulp mill until 2001, which time the pulp mill was closed. GP and the port, pretty much since that point forward, have been working on demolition and deconstruction projects. However, we did retain a number of these industrial icons, everything from the large digester tanks to the tile tanks to smaller industrial icons such as the log lifter, and even down to gears and gadgets and belts and other things that we continue to retain in the hopes that they'll be reused in public open spaces, in some private facilities potentially, to celebrate the history of the site. As a reminder, in 2013, the Port Resolution 1328 also surplused a number of properties when we had components of the GP property when we adopted the Waterfront District Sub-Area Plan and the associated documents. The Waterfront District Sub-Area Plan and the interlocal for facilities with the City of Bellingham also contemplated reusing a number of these kind of icons throughout the site during the redevelopment process. So since that time, it's kind of been sitting idle as we've had other projects and cleanup activities going on and around. However, now our partners at the city are underway with their engineering and design of the Granary Avenue and Laurel Street, the Waterfront District, or I'm sorry, the Whatcom Waterway Park, which Commissioner McCauley had mentioned regarding the beach that the earlier grant or interlocal with the ecology dealt with. And they have a program where they have, for large capital projects, a 1% for the arts, where 1% of the large capital project budget will go towards an art element within that project. And the city elected to use the acid ball in that. And you can see on the left-hand side there, they had a proposal where for the design, fabrication, installation, and embellishments to a waterfront industrial artifact that went out for proposals in August of 2016. I understand they received a significant number of responses to that proposal, request for proposals. The Arts Commission and a jury evaluated those and recommended a specific proposal in January of 2017 with a recent request from the city for the port to surplus this icon and transfer it to the city here just in February of last month. So this shows the selected studio that was selected to do this art piece, and it's referred to as Waypoint. This is an artist rendering, which will relocate this acid ball over closer to the shoreline, include some components that will light it and enhance it, but still retain that industrial feel for it. So for this action, this is a resolution 1631, which will actually officially surplus that icon and authorize transfer to the city. It will continue to be retained for use in a public space to honor the history of the site. We've determined there's no commercial value of this piece of industrial artifact for port, for value to the port. In fact, it probably would be a cost to get rid of it. And in this transfer, the city will retain responsibility for any abatement, movement, relocation, and restoration of the icon. And our determination was that it provides a true and full value to the port. So with that, the staff would recommend approval, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Gentlemen, any questions?
No, I think we've all seen this 3 or 4 times already. I was kind of thinking maybe it could turn into a giant gumball machine, to twirl everything out the bottom for the kids.
Commissioner McCauley?
I now have to make it official and tell my mom it won't be a tiny house, so I guess I don't have anything else to say.
Well, thank you, Brian. I'm glad to see us surplus this and give it to the city, so.
Yep.
Hearing no other comments, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, thank you, commissioners.
Let the record show that passes 3-0.
Thanks, Brian.
Our next item is a break. Do we want to take a break at this time, gentlemen?
You want to crank out some new business between now and the break? I think our presentation is probably longer than 20 minutes. Is that a fair statement?
Be a live forecast?
itself is probably not 20 minutes, but there is discussion.
So it's up to you. We could do new business between now and the break, or we could plow.
Let's do the forecast first. and-
Sure, if you're ready with the forecast, can you do that now? Or did? We'll move that up then, that presentation at this time.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Sunil Harman, Director of Aviation. This is an information presentation because we reached a critical point in the master plan for the airport. This is where you actually delve into the assumptions that develop the forecasts as we look ahead to 2037, because the horizon of the forecast goes that far out. And what we adopt as the official forecast then serves as the foundation for the development assumptions that go into the process. This is part of a public process, so the sequence is we come before the Port Commission as an information item. This same information will be presented to the airport's technical advisory committee, as well as the airport's community compatibility or BIAC advisory committee. And then afterwards, the task itself, which quantifies all of this, the science behind developing the forecast, is formulated and submitted to the FAA for review. Once the FAA adopts the forecast, because it's got certain criteria that it looks at, the document then can move forward. So it's a crucial step in the master planning process. I have John Yarnish, who's the manager of planning with AECOM. They're leading the effort for us to do the briefing for you. I don't think it's a very long presentation, but we have time for Q&A. And with that, I'll turn it over to John Yarnish. Thank you.
Thank you, Sunil. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Sunil. Thank you, Commissioners. What we've been doing is, what we've been doing on the master plan is looking at the existing facilities and then looking at the conditions that will affect future traffic at the airport. It's a key and critical portion of the master plan because the amount of activity that's going to happen in the future drives the need for additional facilities at the airport, if there are any. It's one of the factors. Thank you. It's one of the factors that comes into play when we start to go into the future. The other factors that come into play are safety, if there's any safety-related improvements, critical improvements that are necessary to meet new FAA criteria, or just replacement of existing facilities. But we want to get this as right as possible. And the reason is the last time we did this, we were in the middle of a big growth spurt. And that growth spurt turned around, and turns out that we're about 41% off on the number of passengers that we thought would be using the airport. And the FAA themselves, who adjusted do a year-by-year adjustment, are still off by about 10 to 20%. So it's a critical piece of the master plan that drives a lot of what's going forward. So what we've done to date is we've looked at all the reference information, and this reference information informs us as to what others think is going to happen in the aviation business. And by others, I mean Boeing and Airbus and the International Air Transit Association and the FAA. And that gives us some idea of what the trends that have been identified in terms of what the airlines are doing and what the economy is driving nationally. But we also know that the last time we knew that Allegiant was the low-cost carrier, was driving a lot of the flights with low fares and new destinations. We know that a lot of the folks were coming from Canada across the border because of economic and currency benefits that came from coming from there. But Allegiant then came in and proved that there was a market here. Alaska followed, other airlines followed, and then the exchange rate turned in about 2013. And so it changed the dynamic that was driving. So we looked at developing the new passenger forecast that we're doing now. And what we've decided to do is rely less on a technical forecast and more on a scenario-based forecast, because the scenario-based what's happened is all scenario-driven. By scenario-driven, I mean it's being driven by decisions being made by local airlines, passengers, border systems, what's going on in the region, more so than national figures. So we looked at the regional commercial market, we looked at the capacity of the physical facilities here as well as in other places. We tried to look at likely service enhancements that were going to occur here. One of the benefits of Bellingham has always been that it's kept a low cost to the carriers, so it's made them want to come here and want to operate out of here. What's gone on with the U.S. currency, and then, just what's gone on in the region. So we identified the other airports here, SeaTac, Vancouver, and Abbotsford. If you look at this map, it shows the natural passenger draw area for Bellingham, but that draw area can expand or shrink depending on what's being offered at other airports. What we found, we also looked at the ticket prices. We know the 20 markets that people go to, and what we found when we looked at the ticket prices in November of last year was Bellingham's tickets are the third. SeaTac's the cheapest, Vancouver's the next, then Bellingham. The only one more expensive right now is Abbotsford. So
John,
yeah.
Can you dig into that a little bit more to clarify why the prices are higher here?
I believe the best of our ability to figure is Bellingham started out with the lowest prices, and then as the passengers grew, the airlines bumped the prices up until they could find a level that inversely impacted the attraction of customers, and right now they seem to have found that. We also know that there's a law of big numbers in Seattle and also in Vancouver. If you notice, Abbotsford, who's about the same number of passengers at the moment, they're the highest ticket prices. So there's a lot of market conditions that go into it, but I think what happened is the prices were artificially kept low in order to draw the passengers to Allegiant, and now they're finding their own place for the moment. Now, these ticket prices are susceptible to all sorts of different things. As SeaTac gets into their current expansion program and they run out of gate space, for instance, their rates will start going up, and it'll become a different financial situation here.
If you showed this particular chart in 6 months or a year, would you expect differences, or do these things typically sort of end up where they are right now? Is there that much volatility in this pricing? I guess it's a question.
I'm
to
not
ask.
sure that there's that much volatility that I expect in 6 months there to be major changes here.
Okay.
I think, though, in our analysis of these ticket prices, the ticket prices are one cost. The other costs are, the cost of parking and the cost of the various things that go along with it. And there, Bellingham is much cheaper than the other airports. So that's a message that can be sent and used to market the airport.
So back when we had a lot of the Canadians coming down here, what was the big difference, say, to Las Vegas? The first one there was Vancouver a lot higher?
At that time, yes. Yes, and it was, there were three things that were going on then. The Allegiant was offering lower ticket prices than were offered out of Vancouver. The exchange rate was much better on this side of the border than over there, and the customs and immigration was easier in a car than it was at an airport. So if we look at the current service, we can see where the various airlines are sending their passengers, and that's to, Alaska's gone to Honolulu, Las Vegas, Maui, Portland, Seattle, and Kona. That's their primary destinations, and Allegiant has a slightly more West Coast based, gone to Phoenix, Honolulu, Las Vegas, LAX, Long Beach, Oakland, et cetera. So the number of cities being served out of Bellingham with direct flights is still pretty good for an airport of this size, and the service is still viable here. Even with the higher prices, there's still a good solid base of passengers here in Bellingham. And if we look at the passenger forecast for the region, and all of these passenger forecasts, the blue on the top is the total number of passengers that are expected in the region. And by the region, I mean Southwest British Columbia and Western Washington. There's over 30 million people every year getting on airplanes. Of those, about 20 million are getting on airplanes in Seattle. 10 million are getting on in Vancouver. And the rest are split relatively even right now between Bellingham and Abbotsford. The red line on the bottom, though, is the factor that is untested so far, and that's the initiation of commercial service at Painfield, Snohomish County, down in Everett. That's scheduled to open for passenger service next year. Next summer, as a matter of fact, they'll be constructing a terminal building probably beginning in about May, and they expect to have a commercial service there. So how that impacts service out of Bellingham remains to be seen. We've made some assumptions on that. I'll show you.
Do we know what airlines are going to be going out of
At
Painfield?
the present time, there's been no announcement of what airlines. We suspect that one of them's going to be Alaska, though.
Okay. I heard Southwest. Is there any, have you heard anything on Southwest?
Excuse me, I'll get back to the microphone. The terminal building that they're constructing right now is not big enough for somebody like Southwest. It's going to be a 3-gate terminal building. It's a 30,000 square foot building. So it's about the size that the terminal out here was before your recent expansion in 2014. So it's a small facility. That's what they have environmental approvals with FAA to build. Once they get that built, we would think that it would grow to capacity fairly quickly. But putting additional gates in there is then going to kick off a new environmental process that could take some time. So our forecast, scenario-based, assumes that in 2017, this year, passenger levels are still going to decrease because of Allegiant's announcement that they're going to cut capacity into Bellingham by 9% this year. That's a result of internal airline decisions, has to do with labor negotiations and personnel decisions and stuff. We think in 2018, Payne Field's going to open for commercial service. Now, Payne Field, in my discussions with them, expects 90% of their passengers to come from Seattle. They don't really look at themselves as being Vancouver, Bellingham oriented. That doesn't mean they won't be, because we think when they open, they're going to offer discount flights to new destinations, and they'll attract people. So we think that's going to negatively affect passenger levels here. By 2019, however, both SeaTac and Payne Field will have critical gauge shortages that they can't fix for 5 to 10 years. So traffic here will start to increase again. Now, the FAA and Boeing and stuff says that and the other sources indicate that passenger growth will be about 1.6% per year in domestic markets. So we've said, beginning in about 2019, that growth curve will turn upwards again, but it'll come after two years of decline. And then, from that point on, the market will be maturing, and Bellingham's position in that market will be fixed. And so we think it's likely that it'll grow at about the national average, the same rate that the other airports in the Western Washington are growing at. So go ahead. Go ahead.
The FAA has their methodologies for forecasts. Does it take into account possible recessions?
I'm sorry, the what?
The FAA, do they take into account recessions, or do they just assume everything remains the same and this is the number we're aiming at based on everything remaining the same?
They look at the economy. Their annual forecast conference looks at economic factors and how they'll drive aviation. But I don't know, maybe Sunil wants to offer his opinion. I've never seen them project a downward trend in passengers in the time that I've been reading and looking at their stuff.
But there have been downward trends
There,
in passengers.
there have been, yes, indeed, there have been.
Okay.
But the FAA's, and I wouldn't say this with anything. Traffic goes up and down, but it's kind of like the stock market. It's got that 1 to 2% growth over time on an annualized basis. So I think that's what they're counting on.
Do they tend to, in that case, with these really low numbers of the 1%, that sounds almost like just population growth to me.
Yeah, that's about what it is.
Okay.
Yeah, what they don't seem to be recognizing right now is what I've been hearing a lot in the publications, which is travel's an increasing business. People getting on airplanes is a business that's going to continue to grow. You can do teleconferences, you can go to meetings, but the one-on-one and the leisure travel is continuing to grow. Nobody wants to get on a computer and take their vacation looking at Venice on a computer or looking at LA on a computer. They want to fly to LA. So if you look at the money being invested in the travel business and the airline business, it's pretty robust right now. So I think all the sources, including us and anybody in the business, sees passenger growth is pretty much a given. It'll go up and down, and one year it'll be 2%, and the next year it'll be 1%. But there's a steady growth anticipated over the next 5 to 10 years anyway.
All right, thanks. Rob, you have a question?
So you're saying, give or take a couple percent, 9% decrease in 17, 5% decrease in 18. The previous slide showed a steady increase. Is that because the previous slide was an FAA forecast?
Let me look at the previous slide. Yeah, those are all just FAA forecasts.
So they're saying, 1 to 2% increase every year.
Yeah, that's what they're saying, and they're reluctant to accept the fact that various airports are going to decrease in the short term. But what I'm showing here, Rob, in answer to your question, is our forecast, which is the orange line at the bottom. That's our preferred forecast. The other numbers, the other lines that are showing a continual growth are all based on FAA or industry factors, and we've tried to enter into a 5-year realistic forecast that then the base number for growth is lower than it is today, but the growth still occurs after a point in time.
Another quick question, John. So Payne Field opens, I know they're going to have a pretty limited amount of flights given the new facility, but I'll draw sort of a corollary with me. When there were 3 liquor stores in this town, I bought liquor sometimes, but now it's at every grocery store, I buy it more often. Is Payne,
Is there a problem, Commissioner?
Do we need to seek help or what?
when an airport opens a new service like that, does it entice people who otherwise may not have flown because there was some other thing in the way, but now it's suddenly more readily available and therefore they'll fly more?
I think that I don't know that of any studies. Anecdotal history would
Okay.
tell you that that's true. I mean, if you talk to Southwest Airlines, they tell you they don't steal passengers from other airlines, they create new passengers. And I think that there's a lot of truth to that. I think there's a lot of pent-up demand. And it's really difficult to get to Seattle from Everett, let's say, to SeaTac. And so I think that they'll create new passengers, and I agree that they're likely to take most of their passengers from SeaTac. And SeaTac wants that to happen because they're in critical gate shortage right now. They cannot add gates. They're adding, I think, 15 new gates in their north satellite, and then they're done until they get environmental approvals. And environmental approvals for airport expansion is expected to take quite a while down there, 5 to 6 years.
So with the expected 5% decrease after, here, BLI after Payne Field opens for that new service, is that incorporating what you just said?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So it,
I mean, we're trying to be realistic with it. We know it'll decline. Whether it'll be 5 or 10% is really a hard number to come by.
okay, but you've thought about it in that number? Yeah.
We've had plenty of discussions, and we'll have more, on Thursday with the TAC and the BIAC to figure out what people think before we finalize these numbers.
Thank you.
So what this says is, what if we're wrong? And how do we protect against that? And what this is really the numbers we're carrying forth for planning, which is one that's 5% above what we think is going to happen, one that's 5% below, that we'll use in the future to provide a range of facilities that will be required when we're doing the scheduling of new facilities. Well, it'll be naturally when it reaches a certain passenger level, there'll be things needed. At these rates, it's doubtful that there'll be anything needed at the terminal building during the life of this master plan. The only thing that would spur at this point a need for additions to terminal building is if a new carrier wanted to come in and create a new marketplace here, which is a possibility, but it's impossible at this point to project or to plan for. But we will be planning for a site for just such a facility if and when that situation were to occur. I think more importantly, this banded forecast will serve as the basis for financial planning. Is what's the likelihood of income to come from passengers, and then how low could it go or how high could it go? And that way, as we're doing our financial planning toward the end of the master plan, we'll have some realistic numbers to look at, or what we would consider realistic numbers. So what's that? Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I had a question back I didn't get to ask. I wanted to ask. The 9% decrease due to seat capacity reductions by Allegiant, are their planes that they're going to pull out of here obviously have capacity left on them? Is that what's going on here, or?
I'll turn it over to the director.
Commissioner, that was a question I asked Allegiant at my most recent meeting with them. I met with them a month ago at their headquarters. My concern was that they've based 2 aircraft here, 2 Airbus 319 aircraft. Each of them has a capacity of 124 seats. And if they're reducing the volume by 9%, my concern was, are they going to remove an aircraft? Because the only way airlines make money is utilizing the aircraft to the maximum extent. But their response was they have no intention of removing those aircraft. The decision is being made because they're done with offering these below-cost enticement fares, and they feel that they're losing too much by way of yield and overhead if they continue with the frequency. So this 9% reduction is actually a reduction amongst the cities in terms of weekly frequency. They'll hit all the cities, they just won't as often until the currency issue improves. And their viewpoint is at 78 to 80 cents, there's a possibility that they'll come back with additional frequency. But right now, they're playing what we call the yield game, and that is maximizing their load factors. So even today, as we look at Allegiant, at the worst time of year, which is off-season traffic, their airplanes are 83% full. At peak season, they're 94% full, and they want to maintain that load factor, and that's why this decision is being made. There's a labor issue also. They entered into a pilot's contract about 5.5 months ago, and it requires them to allow additional rest time for pilots between turns. So that's also driving some of this decision, right?
Sunil, you said 78 to 80 cents. That's the Canadian to US dollar exchange rate?
Yes.
All right.
We're hovering around 76, 75 cents right now.
74.6 today.
Yeah,
There you
so
go.
that's not good. We need it up around 80 for the airlines to have, at least for Allegiant to have some comfort level.
It's crazy because it's just 4 cents.
Yeah, exactly.
Come on, Canada.
We've translated these roughly into the number of operations, and the number of operations in 2016 was about 7,900. We're thinking that that's going to maintain, in keeping with what Sunil said, if the passenger growth is the way we're projecting, that number will not change that significantly. Those airplanes will just get fuller and fuller, and or they'll increase the number of seats, and that's what we're showing here, is a gradual increase in the load factors on airplanes. We're also looking at the amount of cargo, and this is all cargo. This is FedEx and UPS, not the cargo that comes in the commercial airplanes, but the cargo that's just strictly air cargo. That business currently is being driven by the local economy. The business has grown in the past and will likely continue to grow based on online shopping and the various things that are causing air cargo to be shipped. But we're assuming it will still, here in Bellingham, consists of the feeder flights coming from either Boeing Field or SeaTac here in the smaller airplanes distributing and being delivered in the county. That could change if one of the carriers were to decide to base an aircraft up here, a larger airplane, and use this as a distribution point. But we're not assuming that that'll happen within this time frame, because the cargo companies like to distribute their cargo close to population centers as opposed to remote sites. The concept of having cargo carriers come into remote sites has been tested and hasn't really played out as well as some planners thought it would. So this will be just a continuation. The forecast we're showing here on both that and this, it'll be a continuation of cargo coming into Bellingham and then or going out of Bellingham to destinations on the island through Wright Brothers or some of the others. We looked at competing general aviation airports. And forecasted based aircraft. Based aircraft have been pretty steady at Bellingham. Based aircraft, the number of private planes based here. But essentially, they've been steady because there's been no place to put new ones. So rather than look at how it's likely to be based on current capacity, we looked at how aircraft ownership is growing. And we think it'll grow from the current 192 airplanes that are here to about 256. So no great growth, but about 60 airplanes over 20 years. Those airplanes are likely to be higher performance aircraft, turboprops, small jets, simply because that's where the growth in the industry is at this time. there's not a lot of single and twin engine airplanes being manufactured and purchased and owned by owners. However, having said that, we do expect aircraft to maintain small piston-powered aircraft. And the operations will grow at about the same level, at about the same percentage rate, growing from about 55,000 to about 65,000. So, which overall today, or last year, I should say, 80,822 aircraft took off or landed here, and we're seeing over the 20-year period for that number to be about 95,800. So, a good steady growth, but nothing that's going to radically change what's going on. So,
John, where does corporate jet, either owned or rent at least, how do they fit into this category?
general aviation.
They're GA, okay.
Yeah, they're in a general aviation. We would expect most of the itinerant, itinerant is an aircraft coming from somewhere other than Bellingham. The local operation is defined as something that's taking off and landing in Bellingham and not leaving really the airspace. We would expect that a lot of that itinerant will be higher-end aircraft over the course of time.
Sure, okay.
And John, this assumes that there will be no increase in another carrier coming to the airport.
That's right, that's right. If
All these assumptions, okay.
Well, yes, with the assumptions, let me back off of that and better define my answer. And as I'm sitting here, the answer to that is yes. We got a base number, and we think it's going to go like this. If another carrier comes in, it's called a point-in-time change, and it'll jump that up. Again, keeping with what Commissioner McCauley said earlier, a creation of a market rather than a dilution of a market. So a new carrier would create new pastures and not take away from the two existing carriers.
This master plan we're building, how close does it have to be? How exact does it have to be for the FAA? And is there consequences if we're not real close with our numbers as far as grants and things, so forth go on?
Commissioner Briscoe, absolutely. If you view the master plan as a highway and you have aberrations, you have economic cycles that are high and low, recessions and the usual market conditions that are affected year to year, and you have your typical trend, that's your center line, which you've assumed is your forecast. You have to be within 10% of the FAA's terminal area forecast to justify using federal money for capital projects. So today, we're 30 and 40% off from our existing master plan. The FAA has the luxury of doing a terminal area forecast every year. We do a master plan looking ahead 20 years, every 10 years or so, typically airports of this size. And we have to stay typically within plus or minus 10% to substantiate capital improvement projects from a capacity demand standpoint. We can do security projects, we can do safety projects. Those are exempt from that criteria. But if they're demand-driven projects, and you have to look, this terminal that you've delivered already has a design capacity of 1.6 million passengers today, as we sit here today. So even if this forecast is wildly off, say it's off by 20%, and we have a 20% increment over the course of this, you'll accommodate that level at a lower level of service. So the queuing will be longer. Perhaps you won't get to the ticket counter as quickly. You may not be able to get your bag as conveniently as you do today. You can still accommodate the activity level. It's when you exceed that grossly, when you get into the 2 million passenger range, which is what a new unit terminal would do. Say an airline comes in and says, we want our own unit terminal. And we have the ability to accommodate them in the current terminal until we deliver a new terminal. There will be a period of what we call reduced level of service or inconvenience. But as we sit here today, there's not a whole lot in this forecast that concerns me. because we're already equipped to accommodate those sorts of growths if they occur.
I hope we have that problem.
And I'm going to disagree with Sunil. There's a whole lot in this forecast that concerns me. We don't want this to, right, we don't want this to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. I just want to remind everyone that 2 years ago, we were projecting over 600,000 passengers this year. So this is nothing more than a forecast. You know, if we get a direct flight to Denver, or we pick up some capacity that way, these numbers change drastically.
I agree. We look at these as ways to shift direction. I mean, what we need to do, correct the course. The FAA views this purely from a capital project development standpoint. That's the purpose of an FAA-driven forecast. It's not to be confused from a business or economic development standpoint. That's what we're here for, is to pursue those new markets and new opportunities and so on.
Thank you, Sam.
Gentlemen, any other questions? I just have one more. Sunil, we had 2 huge snow events this year, and you were out of town on business on both of them. How did you work that out?
We had 5 snow events. I was meeting with the airlines to add new air service, at the first huge snow event. And at the second one, I was actually extending my accreditation credits at an American Association of Airport Executives training program. But staff handled those snow events marvelously. I think there is a criteria that the FAA has now that is much more stringent in reporting runway conditions. We have protested because they've impacted our operations. We deem our runway safe, but if we use that runway condition reporting criteria, it shows it as an unsafe condition. So that's something that many, many airports have issue with, and we're addressing it with the FAA.
I had the pleasure of sitting next to the person from Allegiant that had to reschedule all of the flights the next day when it didn't open until 10 o'clock. And she wasn't a happy camper, but as I explained to her, it's safety first, and it's really out of our control. But I think the staff did a great job.
Yeah, and you brought up an event that was anomalous. We had an aircraft accident. We had a snow event, but we actually had what could have been a catastrophic aircraft accident. The aircraft stopped less than 20 feet from our fuel farm. It careened out of control for almost 800 feet, slid and stopped 20 feet from a fuel farm where we have over 800 gallons of jet fuel stored. But all of our security and operational personnel were responding to that accident. We do that, you have the investigation underway, you have the inspection to ensure that the airfield isn't affected by the debris field. We had snow on the ground, so we couldn't find all the debris to be able to clear the runway. And to compound that, we didn't have the resources if we opened the airfield to address a second event if it happened. So we have the capability to handle one emergency at a time, and that's why the runway was closed till about 5:30 that afternoon. We began removing snow at that point, but by then temperatures had dropped. It had become an icy condition, and that's why it remained closed till 10 a.m. Despite their efforts to move the snow and ice.
I imagine your de-icer bill will be quite extensive.
This season, it's exceeded $42,000, and still.
And what is it in a normal year?
Typically, it's less than $8,000.
And of course, you budgeted for that.
Yes.
Mother Nature.
Thank you very much. Any other questions, gentlemen?
Not for John. I might address a couple of items, so before we leave the topic.
Okay, go ahead. Unless, John, you're finished?
I'm done, I'm just closing out.
Okay.
Do you have anything for John? So, Sunil, you might jump in on this as well. We've gone through a process of getting some land ready for development. It's not really related to the terminal itself or passengers flying, but just airport overall, and that would help with some revenues. Should we take a harder look at doing that? I know it's expensive, but in light of that, we're going to see declining passengers, but we need to get some more income at the airport. should we take a harder look at if we can develop some property and bring in some new tenants out there?
I think we always need to continue and actually expand our search for new non-aeronautical as well as aeronautical development revenue opportunities. We know that the airlines have consolidated, they're shrinking, there are fewer airlines out there. You know, they've figured out how to make money, the airlines have, and they're operating as an oligopoly, basically the four large ones. There's a price leader and then there's price followers. I'll give you an example. Memorial Day, typically a trip to the East Coast during Memorial Day from Bellingham, roughly $600. The fares now are approaching $1,000 for that seasonal period. And that's because there are fewer seats in supply. The other thing that concerns the airport operators is that people like Warren Buffett, who would never invest in airlines, the Oracle, with Berkshire Hathaway, is investing in airlines because they've figured out how to make money. And they're shorting the market, basically, in terms of supply. And the market is concentrating to very large airports like Seattle and Vancouver and drawing away from smaller airports like Bellingham. So there's actually a coalition of 97 airports which we belong to, called the Air Service Alliance of Airports. And we're actually creating a strategy to get airlines to develop new regional air service. Because the concern is you'll disenfranchise about $124 million worth of airline business from smaller cities with the present trend. And so it's a real problem, and all those airports are looking at how to optimize aeronautical revenue and find ways to develop non-aeronautical revenue. So we've opened up the Washington Air National Guard site. That's under negotiations. And if successful, that'll enable us to get in the neighborhood of about $200,000 additional annual revenue. That's just pure leased land rent revenue. Then there's a collateral revenue of fuel sales and the other things that come from new development. But I think we need to pursue other opportunities as urgently as possible.
Gonna be expensive?
Is it going to be
It's
expensive?
gonna be expensive, though.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what you're seeing is a forecast that continues to decline through 2022. So the airport is negative cash flow right now. If that forecast holds true, it's only going to get worse.
Well, the 392 on the forecast, 392,000 in 2022 is concerning because we're getting way too close to not, making our bond payments just based on PFCs at that range.
Yeah, just based on PFCs, we wouldn't make it today. I mean, it's all revenues of the port that are pledged to those bonds. I'm confident we won't default on the bonds, but
Yeah,
it sure
I'm
makes
sure we won't. I just don't want to get that tight.
it
right?
just makes it really hard to do other things at the
Yeah.
port when the airports drain that kind of cash out of the rest of the port. So a couple possible solutions. We try hard to recruit a new airline in here, and if we see some success there, that could turn it around. There's a lot of talk right now at the federal level about the PFCs. And if that could help drastically, if we can go from 450 to even 550, is going to be a big deal. It gives you another $500,000.
So that's another point I want to grab on this. $1 is, when airlines are looking at 4 cents per seat or per dollar and waiting for more of those Canadians to fly here, is $1 at our airport per person? Is that a turnoff?
Well, if you look at the airport's operating budget today, the airlines with direct rates and charges, which is landing fees, rental rates, and everything else that they pay, other than the passenger facility charge, which they're supposed to collect to cover our debt, represents less than 11% of our operating costs. Airlines don't really pay a whole lot to it. It's all the other revenue that's generated off of non-aeronautical activity, like parking, which is 60-some% of our operating revenue, food and beverages and rental car companies that make up the bulk of our revenues. So $1 increase in the PFC would put us, with this forecast, put us in a very comfortable place. The objective is to index the PFC or passenger facility charge to inflation, which then enables us to charge up to $8.50 per passenger. For competitive reasons, we wouldn't do that. We'd just cover our debt service and be satisfied with that.
But every airport would raise that if that was,
Every airport would have the option to raise the PFC. How much they raise it would be based on what sort of competition they're facing. I mean, so.
See, that's why I've never understood why Congress controls it like that, because if we raise it too much, we cut our own throats. I mean, nobody would do that.
Congress controls it because the airlines don't
Yeah,
want it.
yeah.
And the airlines have a very strong lobby in Congress. So that's changing. That trend is, I think, going to be overturned here.
Well, if it
shortly.
changes, then we'll cross that when we get there, but, you know, maybe it's an 80-cent conversation or a $1.05 conversation, but I mean, I feel like, because I've been doing this personally, a dollar doesn't get much anymore, so I typically give an extra dollar on every tip regardless, because it's a dollar, you know, so I don't look at a dollar as being that big an extra bit of deal. $4.50 versus $5.50, it doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, except if you're Everett and you're trying to entice new passengers with a $79 fare.
Right.
And then the real fare is actually what's added on in terms of PFCs.
Yeah.
And it becomes a $115 fare.
Yeah.
Because you have, for each segment, you know, you charge a certain fee, and then the aviation trust fund taxes and all of those that are added on.
It adds up, yeah, I guess, okay. Air cargo. So it would be lovely to get more air cargo. Are we just sort of is there anything we can do, I guess is a question to.
Yes, we can. I mean, first of all, we've got to identify what sort of capacity we have for air cargo. We're not a typical air cargo airport because we've got a 6,700-foot runway. Aircraft are getting larger. The overall fleets are growing larger. That's part of the problem that finds smaller communities losing air services, because the 35 and 50 seat turboprops and regional jets are basically extinct. So air cargo typically is driven by two things. One, well-planned development initiatives to draw certain types of logistics activities, and the other, organic growth. I think we're too small of a market for organic growth. I mean, a population of 200,000. We have a projected reach of about 1.3 million. Large logistics airports thrive on 4 to 5 million catchment areas. The other option is to market for a logistics hub, whether it is an expanded FedEx or UPS or even Amazon or those sorts of. But you know, we've got to first complete this master plan process, identify how we can accommodate freight, pure air cargo as opposed to belly cargo, because belly cargo represents a security issue and is really not something the industry is pursuing right now.
So you're not taking the larger planes, the cargo planes out of our airport. Are the smaller planes at 737, at 320, are they?
They're not
cargo?
freighters.
They're not freighters.
No, they're not. Most of our cargo is carried on Cessna Caravans and so on.
Okay.
So those are just turboprops that get it to a consolidated facility, where then that cargo is moved to Memphis or Louisville or.
I'm just curious, I assume the Wright brothers is a cargo-only plane. How often do they land here?
We've got some San Juan Air type, operators that do the island hopping, and they're fairly frequent. It ebbs and flows, but not on a regular basis. That's the thing. We don't have a very significant air cargo only market here. Most of our cargo into this region is trucked in and trucked out rather than flown in and flown out. So when you check the box on an overnight envelope, that's likely to make an aircraft. But if it's anything other than an overnight delivery, it's typically taken to a larger cargo hub by truck. 80% of UPS and almost 70% of FedEx is ground movement of packages rather than air being so much more expensive.
So Alaska's probably not a destination for cargo from here then?
Not likely.
Okay. That's all I got.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thanks, John.
Gentlemen, you want to recess for 5 minutes or keep slogging on?
Take a break?
Take a break? Please. We'll recess for 5 minutes. Port Commission meeting, is there any public comment after 5:30, through the 5:30 session? Do we have any? Anyone that forgot to sign up? No? Okay, very good. We'll move on to our next item, which is new business. Does anyone have any new business? Commissioner Briscoe?
I think I'll.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I got a thought.
One thing I'd like to speak to is the letter we received at the beginning of the commission. And forgive me if I mispronounced the last name. I believe it's Stephanie Twyford. Her husband, Hylas, started working in the 70s for Tri-County Marine, and she requested that if the commission entered back into having benches with memorial plaques on them, that she would like to have one. I'd like to say that we have some ideas of different things that we've talked about here in the last year to address your requests, amongst other folks' requests. So to Stephan, I believe it's Stephanie, we'll be doing something in the future. I think we have some people in the community kind of helping us work on this right now. But thank you for your letter.
Okay, anything else?
No, I think Mike's kind of talking the
Want me
same
to
thing.
do something, or you still writing? We, let's see, a couple of things. One, we, as a port, received a plaque for Member of the Week from the Chamber of Commerce. And I see Guy was here and he's gone now. Huh. Anyway, we received this, which is nice recognition for what the port does in the community, and pass that over to our executive director. A couple other things. One, I attended the Wild Seafood Exchange up at the Four Points Sheraton, and it was, this is, I think, the third year they've had it. I know I've been to at least two, if not three. And I would just like to discuss that. I'm told that was about a $7,000 venture. And when we have our budgeting session, I'd like us to remember to try and bring that up and discuss that for the ensuing year during our budget time. And if we can remember to do that. And then the other thing, I wondered if we'd done anything on the web locker improvement deal.
Boy, if you're asking me, Dan, I haven't heard a word from staff on anything that's going on, or if meetings have been set up, or
Yeah, not with any-
haven't contacted, no.
And I have nothing else.
So something that's come up, and we did have a conversation in our executive session because of the nature of the conversation regarding the city's property on Roeder. So the city, for those who aren't aware, the city and the commission obviously knows this, but the city's looking at a low barrier shelter for, to house about 200 beds. And it's been a very long conversation for the city internally to find an outcome that's working for what the needs of the downtown are. And there is a very strong component of business people downtown that are really wanting this shelter to happen, to get folks out of doorways. And I do want to bring up, though, and I hope I can get support from the commission overall, but the Port of Bellingham has, I think, especially since with the addition of both Dan and Bobby, a sort of a fierce attention to our marine trades businesses that we may not have had in years past. Just run through a few things. I think over the course of the last few years and coming up will be in excess of a $5 million investment in the Bellingham shipping terminal. We've got a couple $1 million and more planned for Blaine Industrial area. We spent over $30 million in the waterway, the Whatcom waterway, $3 to $4 million in the uplands alone. We've doubled the amount of land that was expected or needed or thought was needed for the Bellingham shipping terminal. There's definitely an effort to consolidate our marine trades properties especially in Bellingham Bay. And the push for this low barrier shelter makes a lot of sense. And a lot of people will say, well, it's only an acre and a quarter in our marine trades, and we have, in excess of 50 acres available. But every little bit that pushes back on marine trades, if you go around the world, you see it constantly. Every stone in the glass brings the water level higher to eventually pushing back so hard on marine trades that, the whims of the electeds that sit up here can be affected by that pressure. And there's no guarantee that the marine trades will stick around, because again, it just comes down to who's sitting up here right now or in the future. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to direct Rob to engage the mayor's office, the city of Bellingham, the city council, and any staff as needed to look at ways to mitigate the loss of that marine trades land and ensure good outcomes for those displaced tenants, as well as the income losses to the other tenants that can't move but are affected. And it's clear that a low barrier shelter is very, very important. It's a high priority for the mayor of Bellingham. I support her for that, and I think she's got a lot of support around the city for that. But I do want to ensure that although this proposal encroaches on our marine trades land, that we do recognize we have a good relationship with the city, and I'd like to find a good outcome overall. I just want to bring that up because it's definitely something that the mayor's moving on right away, and I do think it's important that the city understands that we're going to cling to our marine trades land fiercely. So,
Commissioner Briscoe?
Yeah, thanks, Mike, for pointing that out and bringing that to the folks' attention. A couple of things. It's just not the acre and a quarter that's going away. We have to find some place to put those folks. So it's going to take another acre and a quarter property up where we could have brought someone else in or businesses in and put them. So it's they're being displaced, and we'll find a place for them, but that takes area where we could have brought other businesses into. It's unfortunate that the city wants to put it where it is. This commissioner doesn't feel it's really the proper place for it to be put. I think there are other solutions to the problem. I was hoping we could work on what, but apparently the city doesn't want to do that. She's made that apparent to me. And a lot of people, I think maybe Rob can best explain the low barrier homeless, what the low barrier part means, because I was a little bit distant on what it means. So maybe you could give us the explanation.
Well, I think it just means they'll take all comers, whereas we already have some facilities for homeless. There's a lot of requirements, whether they be religious or non-alcohol and non-drug facilities. They're less appealing to some folks. So this low barrier, I believe, means anyone's welcome.
And the part that anyone's welcome bothers me is that you build it and they will come. Had this discussion with the mayor that I think it's going to impact our area if we build this with this low barrier shelter. So that being said, I would agree with Commissioner McCauley that I would ask Rob to move forward with the city and try and negotiate the best for all. It's as people may or may not know, we do not own that property. Therefore, it's out of our hands to a certain extent of what goes on with the property. So we would, I would much prefer everything stays as it is and we find a better solution. But it appears that one side of the parties involved do not want to work to that end.
Well, I met with the mayor and had a good discussion with her, and I understand the homeless situation is the #1 priority here in this community for the mayor, and I applaud her for trying to find a solution. I have to agree, I don't think that that's a proper place for it, but I'm not sure what a proper place is, and we don't own the property. She assured me she's exhausted all possibilities of where else that could be put. And I know she had long discussions 6 months ago trying to find a location out by the airport that didn't work. So I know she's been working on it. They do own the property. But I want to keep our relationship that we have with the city as a good one. And I hope we can sit down and come to a conclusion through our executives that can get an amicable solution for all of us. I do hate to lose that marine trades area. It is right on the edge of it, and going across the railroad tracks with a homeless shelter when there are 3 buildings on the other side of the tracks and on the other side, or on Holly, it isn't the best location, but I guess she's exhausted most possibilities, so I agree. Let's have our executive director try to work out something where we can live with. Cool. Thanks, Rob. Anything else?
Thank you, Dan.
Anything else? Hearing none, we're adjourned.